Shoot 'em ups, or shmups, or shooters, are one of the genres that the Sega Genesis is known for. There are plenty of great games that were released for this system, and I wanted to gather together 10 of my favorite shooters from the Sega Genesis. Many of these games are ports from arcade games, but that's not really a big deal. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of qualifies for this list. So these are games from my collection. I've got about 400 plus Sega Genesis games, and there are 878 officially released games. That means I don't have a complete collection, but that's besides the point. The games had to be released in the 80s or 90s. They had to be on the Sega Genesis, so Sega CD and 32X games are excluded. So the first game up is Vapor Trail. And this was kind of a surprisingly great game for me to find. It's a vertical scrolling shooter similar to 1942 and Raiden, and it also reminds me of a bunch of games I played on the PC that I can't seem to remember the names for, which is kind of odd. But Vapor Trail gives you a choice between several different planes that you can fly, you have a bunch of different weapons that you can pick up, and it is kind of fun. In this game, you fight against some terrorist organization that's conquered New York, because, why the hell not? And you basically are flying around like many other vertical scrolling and horizontal scrolling shooters, and you're fighting off giant bosses. It's pretty awesome. It does have a few issues that are not that big of a deal, but they're just kind of issues I have with the genre as a whole. Next up, we have Hellfire. Hellfire is freaking awesome. This game made me think while I was playing because it has you just constantly changing up your weapons on the fly. It's pretty great, to be honest with you. It was released by Seismic. It's a horizontal scrolling shooter, basically a space shooter, one of the many, many space shooters out there. Because heck, if you don't know what to do and you've got a horizontal scrolling shooter that happens to be in the arcades, just turn it into a space game. It doesn't need too much. It also makes it a little bit easier to have just a starry background and whatnot. Now, this can be incredibly frustrating at times to play because you're constantly changing up your weapons as you go. You have some that shoot in the front, some that shoot behind, one that shoots in the front, one that shoots behind, one that shoots kind of at the angles, and one that shoots up and down. It can be a little annoying to constantly do that, but it's still a ton of fun to play. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you combined Gauntlet with any shooter out there? Let's say Truxton or something like that. Well, you would have Granada. Granada is a free roaming shooter, so you are moving around in a top-down view, blowing up different spawning points where enemies are constantly coming out of. That's kind of what Gauntlet is like, if you were a tank, and if the game was actually a lot more fun than Gauntlet. I like Granada a lot more than Gauntlet. In this one, it's kind of fun because they give you a strafe button, so instead of trying to angle yourself around, which can be a little tricky in this game, you can just lock yourself in one direction, which works out great, so you can just sort of pop in and out of the different alleyways to shoot your enemies. Granada is a lot of fun, especially as you get further into the game, and the bosses are just big and crazy. It's a very ridiculous game. We have our first Technosoft shooter on here in Thunder Force 3. This game is pretty great. I don't like it as much as Lightning Force, which will appear later on this list, but Thunder Force 3 improves on the second Thunder Force in just about every way. Gone are the top-down free roaming levels from Thunder Force 2, which I absolutely hated, and now it's just a horizontal scrolling shooter. And it's really one of the best ones on the system. What I liked about it is the fact that I could choose to start from any level, so I could experience every level without having to master all of them. Like a lot of others on this list, you're going to have to memorize the level pretty well in order to get through it. It's another one of those tropes that I don't really like about the side-scrolling shooter genre, but it's still a lot of fun. Other shoot 'em ups do it a little bit better, but Thunder Force 3 is pretty awesome. Sega, or better known as Darius 2, is an inexplicably renamed version of an arcade game that is pretty great. But hey, it has giant fish robots in it. How could this not be awesome? I love the Darius series. It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite series of shooters. And yeah, it's absolutely awesome. The game does suffer from the same issues, and I will stop bringing this up, that other arcade games suffer from. You have one-hit deaths, you have limited numbers of continues, and a bunch of other crap that's kind of designed to get you to keep pumping quarters into an arcade game. That works great in the arcades, but once you get to a home console, yeah, you kind of don't really want that anymore. Aside from those honestly minor issues with arcade ports, Sega is a great game, and I'm so glad that it's on the Genesis. So because I like Darius with its giant fish robots, now we get Biohazard Battle, which is just great. It has a lot of the same tropes that something like Darius and R-Type has, and it's sort of toned down a little bit. You get some of the weird biomechanical stuff that you have in R-Type, and a bunch of the kind of weird robots that you might get with Darius. But you have a game that is a lot of fun. You have 4 options of sort of biomechanical ships that you can fly, and you have 4 power-ups regardless of what ship you choose. It's pretty fun to get through. It can be pretty tough at times, but it's one of the great games that Sega made themselves, and it's pretty awesome. One thing I didn't mention with Biohazard Battle, but is pretty much the same with Steel Empire. These are games that I found while I was game hunting, and yeah, they were really great. So back in the late 90s, when I finally had a way to drive around and had my own money, I spent it collecting a whole bunch of games. And Steel Empire is one of the games that I took a chance on because, well, the cover had Zeppelins, and they were blowing stuff up, so why the hell not? Let's see what this crazy game is. There was no internet to find out more about it, so you just have to take a chance on a game like this. And Steel Empire is awesome. You have 2 ships to choose from, and a few power-ups to get. You also have to constantly change from shooting in the front to shooting behind. It's pretty awesome, and I know I've said that a few times already, but Steel Empire is not just one of the best shooters on the system, it's one of the best games on the system. Lightning Force, or as it's better known as Thunder Force 4, is probably my favorite game in the Thunder Force series. It's sort of a toss-up between this one and the third, but I like Lightning Force a little bit more. It has some different stuff in it from Thunder Force 3, so you can scroll up and down a little bit while you're going through the level in Lightning Force. And that's pretty great because it kind of gives you the feeling that you can avoid more stuff, or you have a better chance to avoid things. I really love this game. It's pretty much everything that I loved about Thunder Force 3, but made just a little bit better. I like the graphics a lot more in Lightning Force than I do in the other Thunder Force games. I like the gameplay. It feels a little bit easier than Thunder Force 3, but that could just be me playing it more and knowing a little bit more about the levels than I do with Thunder Force 3. Arrow Flash is one of those games that I didn't give much of a chance to when I first played it. I basically just popped it in my Genesis, made sure it worked, and then put it on a shelf and kind of forgot about it for a little while. I thought it was a little bit goofy and, a little bit too cartoony for me at the time. After I went back and played it, I think it's great. It really is just an absolutely wonderful game. You have basically one ship, so you don't really have the options as others, but you can alternate between a regular ship and kind of a mech, like Robotech or similar media like that. Each form has its own special attack, and yeah, it's pretty awesome to go through this game. I think the graphics are great. Some of the cutscenes are really awesome. This is just a spectacular game, and I was really glad that I gave it a second chance. It's just wonderful. The last game on this list is sort of a weird one. It is Sub-Terrainia, which is a free-roaming shooter. Similar to Granada in some ways, just in the fact that you can move around the level in any way that you want. However, this one has a big reliance on gravity and acceleration. So you are constantly trying to fire your engines to line your shots up. There's a lot of physics at play here. It's kind of more frustrating than the other games on this list, which I think makes it just a little bit better than others. Mostly because I had more fun playing it. So aliens have invaded mines, and you have to get rid of them. And you have to gather some POWs along the way. So think a little bit like Choplifter, but also a little bit like Granada as well. Unfortunately, I wanted to cap this list at just 10 games. So let's talk about some of the others really quick that were left off this list, but I wanted to give them some honorable mentions. So Thunder Force 2, Final Zone, Whip Rush, Truxton, Insector X, Space Harrier 2, and Gary's Twin Cobra, Fire Shark, and Phalios. Those are all games I thought about adding on here. If I wanted to make this like a top 15 or a top 20, I would have done so. And then I would have had a whole bunch of other honorable mentions, though. There are so many great games that I had to leave off this list. Some of them are games that I just personally don't like as much as others. Not everybody's going to like the same thing, so if one of your favorites isn't on this list, that's why. I just didn't like it as much as the 10 games that I put on here. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Well, maybe not. I know, I'm looking over my notes and getting confused again. Yeah, this genre, the shoot-'em-up genre, is really one of the best things on the Sega Genesis. For a system that's known more for like sports games, the shooters don't get as much recognition, at least in my opinion, as they deserve. This is one of the genres that beat out the SNES. I don't think the shoot-'em-ups on the Super Nintendo are as good as they are on the Genesis. But hey, that's what the comments section is for, to tell me how wrong I am. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up, and I mean it this time. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and have a great day, everybody. Bye.